history is the history of the United States.
When I was growing up, it was Columbus Day, and we learned about Christopher Columbus and his boats, and drew little pictures. So whack.
Welcome. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
Tonight in this Facing Race special, we take you on an exclusive Indigenous buffalo hunt.
The buffalo have a relationship with the people.
From a ranch in eastern Washington.
Look at that, that's so cool.
All the way to a feast in western Washington.
It's that satisfaction of, what your elders have asked, it's like, how will you feed the people?
We will show you how this ancient tradition is impacting Native Americans in the 21st century and how it is helping heal wounds from the past.
Indigenous people are still here.
The sun rises over Pend Oreille County and illuminates the unincorporated community of Usk, Washington. Usk, right on the Idaho border, was formerly a logging hub, but is now a quiet neighbor to the Kalispel tribal lands. It's the kind of foggy morning where you might hear things before you see them.
Just the spiritual part of it,
A herd of buffalo.
Look at that. That's so cool.
Sacred symbols for the Indigenous have roamed the area since 1974. The herd, under the stewardship of the Kalispel tribe, is 150 strong.
Can you imagine 1 million of them running?
But when they were first brought over from North Dakota, there were just 12. Now the tribe works with other tribes to help supply for ceremonies and gatherings when needed.
Man, look at that bull. Isn't that beautiful?
Mark Colson, who is part Lakota, is in search of a certain cow.
That's a pretty gray one right there.
A female buffalo.
She's not here.
All right.
We're gonna have to go on the other side.
Colson and his team will take her home to prepare a feast for Indigenous Peoples Day in Seattle.
Once we sing them in, they gonna come in.
Yes.
While they're on trucks rather than on horseback.
They got a nice coat already.
Using guns instead of spears and arrows. The harvest proves to be a bit tricky as the cow remains hidden in the herd.
See her, Johnny?
Not yet. She's just turning her head. Okay, yeah, she's putting her head down right now. Okay, yeah.
Put your rifle on her anyway, so she does give you a shot. You lined up where you want to be?
Yep. Oh, she's gonna give us a show. That's her. Boom.
And it has to be her. She's been specifically set aside by the tribe for this occasion.
Takes time sometimes.
It's now become more of a hunt as the team approaches hour 2 of stalking and hoping. Then, after many false starts, the moment reveals itself.
Reload.
It takes 2 to bring her down.
Good shot, man.
Unlike what many might consider a traditional hunt, there are no high fives or joyous celebrations. The overwhelming emotion of the group is one of sorrow and deep gratitude. Immediately, Mark prays, offers the sacred gift of tobacco, and uses sage to smudge the buffalo, another ritual that purifies and dispels negative energy.
We're just letting the spirit of the animal, asking it to go in a good way. We took it in a good way. We honor it. We're honoring it first and foremost.
When asked why it was so somber, Mark says he couldn't help but think about his ancestors.
It's just all that it represents, the whole thing, feeding the people, the ceremony, the camaraderie, everything together is just like a wave of emotions. Somebody get the barbecue going.
The ceremony is quick as they don't have much time to process before bringing the cow back to Western Washington. They work to drain, strip, and part the buffalo. It's hard work that takes multiple people and several hours. Hands getting cold and slippery from the tallow.
Nice and slick.
The mood has shifted to joy now, with plenty of laughter to go around.
We know what we're eating. We know where it came from. We're putting all this love and laughter, all that medicine's going into the food, right? And so that's what we're going to feel when we eat it.
Watching it all is Ixley Whitehawk. Whitehawk is Mark's partner and organizer of the Indigenous Peoples Day celebration for the last 10 years.
The buffalo have a relationship with the people. And taking the shot is a commitment. Each and every one of us that was present, even though we didn't physically took the shot, we make a commitment. And we make that honoring to that buffalo. We thank it, in our own way.
And honoring the whole animal, as it's been done time immemorial, means eating and using every part. The pelt and skull will be used in ceremony. The bones made into tools. What's inside the buffalo also does not go to waste.
Everybody took a bite.
Eating the liver is ceremony too. Hailed as the most nutritious organ, Colson explained the liver was the people's choice to satiate hunger quickly after the hunt.
How is that?
Clean, you know what I mean? Like, it's, if you think of like, oh, it's raw meat, right? It's like, get psyched out by it, right? But it's really clean. It's very mild.
From the easternmost edge of Washington to Skokomish, the buffalo meat has traveled more than 400 miles to be honored and processed before use. The very next day at Mark and Ixley's house in Skokomish, both he and Ixley's 18-year-old have their work cut out for them.
We're going to be up all night, so we'll be doing that later.
Slicing, dicing,
Try this knife.
and filleting
Just like that.
the meat needed for the big Indigenous Peoples Day feast.
This may be another roast. Oh, it's just a cool feeling, It's that satisfaction of, what your ancestors or your elders have asked, it's like, how will you feed the people? And it's like, physically, metaphorically. So it's just satisfying.
This
Okay, go like this.
is also a passage of generational knowledge
This will be good practice for you.
in the most hands-on way.
See how I get my knife in there? So we are working with Lucius today, and this is their first time butchering, right?
Everyone is welcome to the Indigenous Peoples Day celebration, but Colson says he's particularly excited for the Native youth
It helps you learn to use your knife as an extended part of your body.
who don't get many opportunities to connect to their roots in this kind of way.
To show them, we're still here, that they have a history and who they came from, all the tough times that their ancestors went through to still be here. And, really encourage that, who are you? Where do you come from? And what are you made out of? So that they can keep going for this next 7 generations.
It will be a few sleepless nights in Skokomish,
It's easier like that.
but this one
I
buffalo
have my blade just slightly tilted.
will feed
Okay, you try.
hundreds.
To sit back and look at the whole community, having one buffalo as part of them now, it's pretty neat, It's like feeding the people, not just filling their tummy, but it's healing. It's spiritual work taking place, happening on a day that we had to fight for to be recognized.
And that fight is still ongoing. While many communities celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, federally it is still Columbus Day. Coming up, we dive into the context of the dueling holidays, both emotional and historical. In 2020, as the world protested for social justice following the police murder of George Floyd, an old wound resurfaced: the legacy of Christopher Columbus. Protesters vandalized monuments of colonizers and slave owners all over the nation. Columbus statues were not immune, not especially after then-President Trump signed the annual Columbus Day proclamation saying, quote, "Sadly, in recent years, radical activists have sought to undermine Columbus's legacy, and this June, I signed an executive order to ensure that any person or group destroying or vandalizing a federal monument, memorial, or statue is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Since then, Columbus Day proclamations have changed in tone. The Biden administration's Columbus Day proclamations focus on the heritage of Italian Americans, calls Columbus's voyage historic rather than heroic, and acknowledges the painful history of wrongs and atrocities that many European explorers inflicted on tribal nations and indigenous communities. Biden also became the first president in U.S. history to also issue an Indigenous Peoples Day proclamation on the same day. Christina Roberts, the faculty fellow at Seattle University's Indigenous Peoples Institute, says she grew up learning about Columbus a certain way, too.
I'm sure many of us remember learning in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Roberts, who is Nakota and A'anenin, says correcting that interpretation is the first step in healing.
It's important to acknowledge that Columbus was not a hero. He was somebody who was ambitious. He was somebody who was driven. He had a desire to want to prove that he was a capable person to return the favor of what occurred to allow him to have that opportunity. But some of the things that are not focused on are what happened after the fact.
Roberts means genocide and other acts of terrible violence.
I'm thinking about the fact that hands were cut off. Babies were murdered, women were raped. There were so many horrific things that occurred during that intense time period that there was no consequences at that time, at least for the people who were doing those things. And in fact, they felt justified.
To have a day to celebrate the very man who terrorized the indigenous people of Turtle Island, the name they gave North America, Roberts says, feels deeply hurtful.
I cannot represent all Indigenous perspectives, but when I think about it myself, it's just incredibly painful. It's almost as if it becomes a day of mourning, a day of recognizing all that has occurred in the past.
To be clear, Roberts says she's not suggesting, quote, revisionist history like the Trump administration's proclamation accused people of doing.
There is a part of me that also recognizes we can't erase the past. We cannot move away from things that make us uncomfortable. And yes, I would love to see a time and a space when there wasn't a day set aside to celebrate an individual like Christopher Columbus. But at the same time, I would not want to erase his influence. I wouldn't want people to be ignorant about what occurred during that time period.
But many states, cities, and municipalities have already moved towards observing Indigenous Peoples Day in lieu of Columbus Day. Seattle officially recognized the day 10 years ago after City Council passed an ordinance.
This is a moment to recognize a community and their contribution, to acknowledge the discrimination and pain. It is an opportunity to come together and to heal.
Since then, every second Monday of October has been Indigenous Peoples Day. According to Pew Research, only 16 states in American Samoa still observe Columbus Day exclusively. Roberts says the tide of change proves the resiliency of the Indigenous community.
To push for a day of celebration, to push for a day of recognition, to have it correspond with a day that once represented so much pain is something that I feel is a part of the ongoing healing that we all need as we move forward, because we're stronger together.
Coming up, that big day of celebration all comes together with one unifying item on the menu, that buffalo from Usk, Washington. Stay with us to see what kind of dishes are served. In a matter of 3 days, the buffalo has been hunted and processed for the big Indigenous Peoples Day feast. This isn't just about the meal, it's about preserving tradition and celebrating cultural heritage. And like any major celebration, the preparations begin before the first guest arrives.
Now we can start on the bread.
A good meal has to have some carbs.
What are you getting ready to make here?
The buckskin bread.
Marcella Johns and her spiritual sister Diona are making heaping servings of bread to mop up the buffalo stew.
It has a hard shell, but then the inside
is really soft.
Johns, who is Skokomish, is an Indigenous foods caterer. So she's not necessarily feeling the heat about feeding hundreds.
I started cooking with my grandma when I was little. And, you know, she says that your mood and your prayers and everything that you have while you're in the kitchen is like in the food. We've been like laughing all day. So I'm hoping that as people are out there, you know, eating the food, that they're happy and feeling good and just want to laugh.
Everything they're making is traditional. There are stuffed pumpkins.
That has the buffalo, the wild rice, leeks, garlic, maple syrup, and almond slivers.
Wojapi, a kind of fruit spread.
Instead of like the choke cherries like they used down in South Dakota, I used blueberries because that's like what we have here. It goes on everything.
And Mark's contribution, buffalo stew.
He's got corn, green beans, ground buffalo, potatoes, carrots, onions.
John says there's a reason why people call food medicine.
Doing traditional foods and like going out and gathering and preserving and then preparing, it just kind of makes you more in tune with what you're serving. And it's healthier.
Healthier and happier too.
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
And the feast begins.
Very hot, very hot.
Hundreds lined up for what ended up being a full plate of Indigenous food, expressions of joy. The buffalo stew quickly running low.
Everybody liked it.
Do you want to hold that one?
Raven and her mom Olivia say they've looked forward to this all day.
I was exhausted because the full day of events. And I almost didn't come, but I was like, ooh, but they're gonna have the good bison.
Olivia says she knew the Indigenous folks would serve buffalo the right way.
I'm a chef, and so I just feel like it's really important to know where your stuff comes from and know that it's like fresh, like it hasn't been sitting around, it hasn't been through like a bajillion people's hands and on a bajillion different tables.
Joseph and Azalia Barnhart also saw the appeal of a good buffalo meal.
It's great, it's juicy. You know, I've had it before, so you know, I'm familiar with it, and if I could eat it more than I could eat beef, for instance, yeah, I would definitely choose that.
More important to Barnhart, though, is the gathering of people itself. Something he wanted Azalia to witness.
The chief wasn't about who had the most money. It was about who was the most respected in the tribe, the people that they trusted the most. And so when they put on events like this, very, very similar to like this, you know, it shows like that trust in the community. People feel safe, people feel wanted, you know, and they're able to, you know, be themselves and to reconnect with family and make new friends as well.
Olivia, who is a member of the Nisqually tribe, says she won't let Raven grow up in the dark about her culture and history.
When I was growing up, it was Columbus Day, and like we learned about Christopher Columbus and his boats and like drew little pictures, and like that was a craft we made. So whack. For me, I wasn't raised like knowing a lot of like my Indigenous culture, and so I just want her to like just know it as she's growing up and not be ashamed of it, and like she's super excited to see the dancers, which is why we're just sitting here.
Welcome. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
As the programming starts, there's song and drumming. Celebration and deep discussions.
The idea that Columbus Day as an ideology exists in this place where this person never even stepped foot, right? It says a lot about how far and how long our colonization and colonialism and oppression has impacted us from the very, 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 very tip of this continent to the very, 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 very other side.
Millie Kennedy, who was instrumental in passing Seattle's Indigenous Peoples Day recognition ordinance, explained the work that went into reclaiming the day.
The city of Seattle became the second major city in the United States to pass an Indigenous Peoples Day resolution. Wait a minute, that's not all. The city of Seattle is also the very first major city to make Indigenous Peoples Day a holiday. That was on Monday, October 13, 2014.
And finally, Ixley, having gone through a full day of events, briefly takes the stage with a reminder.
We can have families that we are born into, but when we build intentional kinships, we walk with responsibility and we walk with accountability, especially for our young people, for our little ones that are coming onto this world, that they are learning as we walk here in the ways that we are sharing this way of being.
I think that there's a good movement going on. Different states, different cities, they're all starting to adopt Indigenous Peoples Day as a holiday in their own rights. And so I think that trend is just going to keep growing, until we're able to have majority of states want to recognize it to help push the federal government to make it a national holiday.
Resiliency and the adaptation of tradition, something to look forward to every year.
Indigenous people are still here. There is a ton of us, and we matter.
Here we are in 2024 on a ranch in another reservation, taking a buffalo to feed the urban Indians. So it is, it's deep, and you think about it, it's like, yeah, hey, our prayers are answered, We are living our prayers. We're living the prayers of the ones that prayed for us years ago, and we're still doing this. We're here.